Hello everyone, I hope you're having a great day. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I get to share with you a balloon box. Now this is a pre-designed card kit. It's available over at the Spellbinder shop and it's from Fun Stamper's Journey. Spellbinders and Fun Stamper's Journey are now together in one shop. And this is the October Beautiful Friendship Kit. I believe they come out with a new blue box every month. So right now, November's in the shop, and then also December's is in the Spellbinder shop. And I'll leave links down below in case you want to check them out. But these are pre-designed cards. This little kit comes with everything you need to create those 4 cards. It gives you a supply list here, but basically the only thing that you need are your inks. If you'd like to emboss, your embossing powders, your watermark inks, and your glues and adhesives, but everything else is in there. So you get step-by-step instructions on how to create each one of these pre-designed cards, which is lovely. This is the first card. This is the second card here. Now today too, I'm going to be following the directions for the first card and the second card, but for the third and fourth card, I want to kind of put a little Tina twist on it and I want to create my own card using the stamp set and the supplies that are in the kit. Something a little bit different. But let's take a look. You get 4 A2 size envelopes. They're included in this little box here. And then you get a full-size stamp set. This is the Beautiful Friendship stamp set, and it has some beautiful cone flowers. I am a fan of cone flowers and I love them. The stamp set itself is a red rubber stamp and it's quality. It comes on this thick plastic storage sheet, which is great. Don't throw that out. Those are nice to store your stamps on. You just remove the plastic off of the back of your stamps and these punch out, and then you can place them on your storage sheet there. You get 3 sentiments in the stamp set. Life is better with friends. A sweet friendship refreshes the soul. Friends make the world beautiful. So beautiful sentiments. And I'm just going to punch all of them out. You get 2 small leaves. You get 3 cone flowers in 3 different sizes. And then you get two flower stems. And then this leftover piece you can just toss. But that's your stamp set. Love that. And I like that there's images on the very front of your red rubber too. So it makes stamping easy. So these are your 4 packages. 1 for each card that you're going to make, and it comes with, of course, the sequins, your cardstock, your card bases. Everything is pre-cut for you. Makes it easy peasy. And I'm a fan of these kits. In the past I've showed videos with pre-designed cards. I like these because the company does the legwork for you. You don't have to worry about designing or pulling out everything in your craft room to kind of figure out what goes with what. Everything is designed for you and it's just made easy peasy. It's great for travel too. If you are planning to get away and want to create a card with no mess and fuss, I think this kit is perfect for that. So that's the Spellbinders or the Fun Stamper's Journey from Spellbinders Bloom Box. This is the October kit. Again, it's called Beautiful Friendship. So let's make some cards. And again, for card number 1 and card number 2, there's my friend. She wants to create a card too. What I love too about these is there's no mess. There's absolutely no mess. When I was done creating these cards, my craft room was still clean. How about that? Okay. So we'll take the white cardstock here and we're going to do some stamping. We're going to stamp the sentiment. For this card I chose, well, the sentiment in the instructions says life is better with friends. So I'll place that on my mini Misty and we'll ink that up with the brown ink. Now again, I'm bringing in my own inks, and actually Fun Stamper's Journeys have their own inks that coordinate with their paper beautifully. So if you're interested in that, I'll leave links down to the Fun Stamper Journey inks also. But after we stamped our sentiment, and the red rubber cleans up beautifully. Now we're going to stamp our flowers and our stems. For our stems, we're going to use green inks, and I wanted to create a gradient, so I'm using, for the stems, just one color, but for the leaves, I want to use 2 different greens. Now I'm using the picture as a guide to where to stamp my stems. Now this part, there's room for error on where to stamp the stems because you're filling up your panel with the flowers, and so there's no right or wrong way to stamp the stems and the leaves here. But I'll stamp 4 of them. Now I'll take the largest leaf in the stamp set, and here's where I want to create a gradient. So I have a light green and a darker green ink. We'll take the largest leaf, and using the lighter ink, I'll ink up my leaf, and then I'm just adding a dab of the darker ink towards the top of the leaf to give it a gradient. I'll do the same thing. We'll stamp that leaf again, and then we're going to do it one more time with the lighter ink, and then I'll just kind of dab it in the darker ink off to one side, and we'll stamp our 3rd leaf here. Now we'll clean off our stamp, and then we're going to grab the smaller leaf, and we're going to do the exact same thing, creating a gradient of color. Okay, once we have our leaf stamped, we're going to take the smaller stem, and we'll stamp that. We'll connect it along the larger the stem. Okay, now we get to stamp our coneflowers. For the coneflowers, we're going to stamp on the extra piece of white cardstock, and I'm going to use a yellow ink and then like a taupey color ink. I'm going to ink up the largest coneflower, and then using the taupe, I'm going to go around the edge of the bottom of my flower, give this a little bit of a gradient, kind of making those edges of my coneflower petals darker. We'll take the medium-sized flower, and we'll stamp that the same way. I'm just making sure I have enough room on this panel, and I had plenty of room. We'll ink it up with the lightest ink, and then just dip the bottom of the flower petals in the darker ink. And we'll take the smallest coneflower, and we'll stamp that twice, doing the exact same thing. Now for the flower centers, there's 2 different size flower centers. I'm going to use my brown ink for the flower centers, starting off with the largest one. We'll ink that up and stamp right in the center of our flower. Lovely. Next, we'll grab the smaller flower center and do the same. Now the smallest flower center will go on the medium-sized flower and the smallest flower, and they fit beautifully. Okay, I'm going to use my scissors and fussy cut each one of my flowers out, and then once we have that done, we're going to set that aside. Now there was some splattering in the step-by-step instructions, so I'm going to be using some distress ink. This is Vintage Photo. I just added a little bit of water, and using a paintbrush, I'm going to do a little splattering on my background here. And then we'll clean this up, and I grabbed Tattered Rose distress ink, and it was a little bit too light, so I pulled in some Picked Raspberry distress ink. I'm going to mix them both together. I'm kind of creating the same color as my card base, and so we'll do a little splattering with that pink, and I think it coordinated pretty good. Okay, now this is going to dry pretty quick, so we'll take our flowers, we're going to flip each one of those over, we're going to take some foam squares and add a little dimension to these flowers. Starting with the largest flower, we'll place that on our panel. Lovely. And here you can see with all these flowers, your placement with the stems and your leaves, it really doesn't make too much of a difference because you're going to be covering up some of that with your flowers. So it makes it easy. And I think that looks great. Pretty close to the picture. Okay, now I'm using some glossy accents and going over the centers of my flowers. These flowers have a little glitter on the center of the cone flower. So we'll grab a piece of scratch paper and then grab our little bag of glitter. We're going to add a little bit to each one of the flower centers. We'll just pick that up and tap it off, any excess, and it adds nice little sparkle. I think that's so neat. We'll take the rest of this, put it back in the package. Now, I like to mention on my cards, so this is something extra that I did. I added a piece of fun foam directly on my card base, and then this way I can place my panel right on top of the fun foam, and it gives it a little bit of dimension. But I did take my scoring board and scored my card right in half, and the colors are off with the inks, but I think it's pretty close, and that's my first project. Okay, using, again, the step-by-step instructions, we're going to start off by doing some stamping. We're going to take this pink cardstock here. Now, the instructions say to heat emboss it, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do a tone on tone. So I have 2 pink inks here, and I'm just going to use the darkest one. I'm going to stamp that along with the flower center all over the panel. We're going to cover the entire panel. Now, if you wanted to use some embossing powder in your watermark ink as a tone on tone, I think that would look pretty too. But I think this looked just fine. Now, once my background panel is all filled in, I think that looks so pretty. We're going to work on our tag. So using the picture as a guide, I'll take the small flower here, and I grabbed the wrong one. I'm going to take the smallest flower. We'll ink that up with a dark ink, and I want to do a gradient with this flower. So I'm mixing 2 different pinks. We'll stamp this flower 3 times. Kind of in the center. Lovely. And then now we'll take our brown ink and stamp the center of our flower. Lovely. Now we'll take the smallest stem in the stamp set and we'll stamp that with green ink. And again, I'm just using the picture as a guide on how to stamp these. Lovely. We'll clean that off. We'll grab our small leaf. And I want the gradient too, so I'll ink it up with the lightest ink and just go around the edge of it with my darker ink. Now, hindsight, I think I would have just used my lighter ink because we're going to stamp our sentiment over it. The ink did lift a little bit, which was okay. But it was the darker ink that I used was maybe a hair too dark. Okay, now we're going to take our sentiment. Our sentiment for this card is "A sweet friendship refreshes the soul." Super cute. We'll stamp that with the same ink we used for the coneflower centers. We'll stamp that right over our flowers here. Lovely. Okay, I'm going to take our lighter pink paper and we're going to adhere this to our card base. I did already score it and fold it in half. I'm going to take 3 of the scallops. I just trimmed it off of that strip, and we're going to attach that behind this panel here. I need to add a little more adhesive, and then we're going to just tuck it under the top here. And then we'll go ahead and stick that down on our card base. And since everything's pre-measured, there's not too much cutting involved, which is great. Okay, I'm going to use the ribbon, and we'll loop that through our tag. And then taking the green twine, we'll tie a bow and secure our ribbon to our tag here. And then I did use my scissors to trim down the ribbon, and I'm going to keep that extra piece. I actually used that for one of my later cards, but we'll angle the ribbon and trim off the tails of our twine there. Okay, next we're going to adhere this strip of green paper. This came in the little set. We'll adhere that with our tape runner. And there was a little excess overhanging, so I trimmed that off. Now there was splattering on this card too, so I'm going to use some vintage photo. We'll just water it down and then pick it up with our paintbrush and do some splattering. And then on this card there was white splatters too, so I used some white acrylic ink and did some splattering as well. Now I'm going to add a couple pieces of foam tape behind my tag, because I like to mention on my cards. We'll just remove the release paper and place those on our card here. I'm going to straighten it just a bit. And then for bells and whistles, they are included, so we're going to use the silver sequins and add 3 to the top and then 2 down here on the bottom. And then I am going to add a little bit of glitter to the center of my flowers. I'll use my glossy accents, the same as we did with card number 1. And then I'll use the glitter, just sprinkle a little bit on each one of those. Grab some scratch paper here. We're going to add some more sparkle. And then we'll just tap off the excess. And that completes my second card using the instruction booklet. So a beautiful layout, I think. Easy peasy, and there's no mess. And I do have a little bit extra, which is great. So that's card number 2. Here's a close-up. Pretty close. Okay, now for third project, we're going to do a Tina twist. That's my new term here, Tina twist. Okay, so I'm going to fold my card base in half, and I'll just use my bone folder to score it, reinforce that score line. Now, I really like the pink and browns together. I think it's so pretty. So I'm going to create some pink flowers. I'm going to use some lighter pink ink, and I'm going to stamp that on the piece of white cardstock that's used for stamping. I'll stamp that, and then I'm going to take the medium flower and we'll stamp that as well. For this card, I'm only going to use 2 flowers. Lovely. Now I wanted to add a little bit of a gradient color for my flower, so I'm taking the brown ink that I have and I'm dabbing just the end of the flowers, but there were some harsh straight lines, so to fix that I'm just taking my stamp cleaner and I am dabbing off those straight lines. Now these are so easy to line up because of the picture on the very front. It's exactly positioned where your stamp is. So it made it easy for me to layer without using my MISTI. I did that to both flowers and then did the same thing to the center of my cone flower. Now I'm taking my green ink and I stamped the stem of the flowers, and using that two-tone gradient inks, I'm going to stamp one stem in the larger 2 leaves, and then I need a stem for my smaller one, and I fit that on there. We'll stamp that stem one more time, and we'll take the smaller leaf and do the same gradient effect, inking up with the lighter ink. And then we'll stamp it with the darker ink just on the edge, and we'll stamp 2 of the smaller leaves. Now I fussy cut each one of my stems out and my leaves, so they're ready to go. Now this card came with a piece of vellum. I'm kind of positioning where I want my flowers and everything to go. Once I have it figured out, we'll go ahead and stamp our sentiment on the vellum. So the sentiment says, "Friends make the world beautiful." I went over the vellum with my anti-static powder tool, stamped it with my Versamark ink, and now we're going to add some white embossing powder. And we went ahead and melted that. Now there was a green piece of pattern paper and for this card, and I just trimmed it down to fit right behind my vellum, and then using my tape runner I adhered my vellum to that green cardstock. I cut the rest of my scallop in half, so there's 4 little scallops, and I attached it to the bottom of my sentiment. And then I went ahead and attached the stems of my flowers to my flowers itself, and then I attached that to my sentiment piece. Now we're going to offset this oval and place this on the pink cardstock that came for this card. I'm going to trim off the excess here, and then I'm going to go ahead and add foam tape behind my flowers and my sentiment panel, and then we'll place that on our pink cardstock. Now all we have to do is add tape behind this panel and place this on our card base. And I think that's my twist for this card. I think it turned out cute. Now for bells and whistles, we're going to use a few of the sequins. Now these are super pretty. They're little flowers. So I added a few here and there, just using my glue. We'll put the rest back in the bag there. And so this is my version, and then this is the kit's version. So another option for you. Here's the close-up. Now for my last card, this card here was a square card, and I decided to make it an A2 size card, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Since we do have a A2 size envelope, I thought it would be okay. I'm going to trim down. This is actually the card base. I'm just going to trim it down so it's slightly smaller than an A2 size card base. I'm going to take the white cardstock and I'll stamp my flower with some yellow ink, and again I'll do the same gradient effect that I've been doing with the rest of them. That was the medium size flower, and now I'm going to stamp the smaller flower with the yellow ink, and I'm going to do the same 2 flowers, but this time I'm going to use my pink inks, a lighter pink and a darker pink. So inking up with the lightest, and then I'll be dabbing the darker on the edges. And you really couldn't tell with these two. I think I should have used maybe a darker color pink. But I'll stamp the smaller flower, and then I'm going to re-stamp the largest pink flower using the darker pink. And it's so easy to line up. Red rubber is sometimes hard to line up because it's hard to judge because it's not see-through, but these line up pretty easily. I had no problems lining them up. We'll just ink our center of the flower up with our brown ink, and then I'm going to go ahead and fussy cut each one of these out. Okay, now I lost some footage here, but I did stamp the stems and the leaves on the white cardstock that has the polka dot border on it. I just stamped the smaller leaf with the stems with my green inks. Now I'm adding foam adhesive behind each one of my flowers, and we're going to adhere 3 of them, and then we're going to keep this last one off to the side. I'm going to go ahead and adhere my panel. Oh no, we're going to stamp our sentiment. I'm going to emboss it on the yellow cardstock here, and I'm going to use my white embossing powder, and I went ahead and stamped with Versamark, and I went ahead and melted that embossing powder. Okay, I already adhered my panel to my white panel to the yellow panel, and I thought we needed one more leaf, so I'm stamping it, and I actually mixed up my lids to my inks, so we're going to stamp the leaf one more time. There we go. I'm just going to fussy cut this leaf out. Once we have this cut, all we have to do is flip these over and add some foam adhesive behind there, and I did tack them down to my yellow panel there. Now this little heart came with this card, and I had this little extra piece of ribbon left over. I'm going to tie a knot on the heart itself. It's a little paper clip, which is super cute. After I tied the knot, I just trimmed down the excess of the ribbon, and then I just attached it on the left side of my panel here. I couldn't tuck it all the way in because my foam tape. I didn't want to ruin my panel, but I still think it looks adorable. Now I have an A2 size card base that I pulled in from my stash. And that finishes up. Well, no, we're going to add bells and whistles. There, I'm going to use some of the flower sequins that came for this card. And I added a few here and there. And then that's my alteration for card number 4. I think this one's my favorite. I really love the way this turned out. Super pretty. So we'll take a look at the kit card, and then here's my card. So pretty close in colors, just a little bit different. Here's a close-up. Now we get to take a look at all 4 cards that I made today with the October 2018 Beautiful Friendship Bloom Box. Starting with the first 2 cards that are made exactly like, well, pretty close to the kit instructions. And then the last 2 are my little alteration on the cards. Different ideas. If you do get the box, maybe this gives you some different options on how to use it. But it's a beautiful stamp set, and like I said, November's kit and December's kit are in the Spellbinder shop, and I'll leave them below. What I have left is my full-size stamp set on this nice little storage sheet. So beautiful set, and I have a few pieces of cardstock left over. And then I have some flower sequins, a little bit left there. I have some silver sequins. I have some glitter, and then a little leftover piece of twine, which I don't know why I put it in the envelope. I don't think it's big enough to make a bow. And then you get your envelopes to mail those out immediately. So this is the Bloom Box. Let me know what you think, guys. Have a fantastic day. Thanks so much for stopping by. We'll see you again soon.